What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916, getting down with Fresh Out. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the channel. You don't want to miss out. I'm here with my friend Lindsay, and man, we got some great stories to share with you guys today. And Lindsay, I always, wanted to ask you, in regards to law enforcement and women, especially black women, and your experiences having worked in that field. What was it like, and what kind of influenced you to go into law enforcement, having been more exposed to the entertainment side of the of business and stuff like that? What made you want to become an officer of the law?
Well, it's not a glamorous story, I'll tell you that. A lot of times people ask me like, hey, do you want to be a cop since you were a little kid? And I used to lie and tell people yes, but that's just not the story. The story is I needed a job when I graduated from college. That's basically what happened. Now, I did go to school for criminal justice. I majored in criminal justice, but it wasn't because I was thinking about going to law enforcement. I don't like math, and criminal justice had the least amount of math classes in that major. So I graduated from college, and I go pretty much straight into law enforcement. And I think what happened was I had to do an internship to graduate. It's like a 10-week internship. And the first couple of weeks of internship, I was like, this is a dumb job. I don't want to babysit grown people all day, because that's what it looked like to me. You show up and I'm telling someone who's older than me a lot of times what they're doing wrong and what they need to do to fix what's their current circumstances. But maybe 3 weeks or so into the internship, I was riding with an officer, because I would ride with a different officer every week, and I would have to write up my observations and things like that. And we were on a call, I think it was like a shoplifting call or something like that, and a sergeant came out, and he's dealing with these two young women who were shoplifting. One of them had her baby with her. And I remember him talking to them with almost like this dad demeanor. And I think that was the first time, other than watching TV, obviously, but in person, seeing an officer not just show up and be the authority figure in a negative way, meaning I'm going to show up, I'm taking you to jail, I'm writing a ticket, and that's it. He connected with those young ladies. They were still in trouble. They still, got arrested, unfortunately, but he connected with them. And I was like, oh, okay, that was different. That's not something I'd actually expected. And that kind of spoke to me, because I think when I look back in my life, I've kind of always been in the I like to help people mode. I've kind of always been that friend people would come to. I was in JROTC when I was in high school. I remember being the hall monitor back in the day. So I was kind of always on this path. And I genuinely like helping people. As corny and cliche as that can sound to people sometimes, I genuinely enjoy helping people. I'm talkative. You get to go out and talk to different people every day. I'm not tied to a desk. That was something I always said I never wanted. I never wanted a job where I was stuck at a desk all day. That would drive me crazy. My patrol car was my desk. That was my roving office, And so, once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. Even my major in criminal justice, I had some really, really great professors who had done the job. And they were speaking from experience. They weren't just teaching from a book. And I was like, man, that seems kind of cool that you can affect somebody's life like that with just a positive contact, And, I enjoyed it. I did it for 17 years, and I enjoyed most of it. It wasn't always glamorous. It wasn't always what you see on TV. There's a lot behind the scenes that the public doesn't see and doesn't understand. But I really enjoyed my career while I was in it.
And what would you say would be some of the biggest misconceptions? Because, I've been on the other side of the law. And, I tell people that, I can't be mad because I was out there doing what I was doing and then I got caught. But at the same time, there was a big push to say, hey, there's a excessive amount of minorities being targeted by the police, and blah blah blah, and just a really negative connotation, which has kind of resulted in now where crime is just crazy.
Yeah.
But so what would you say would be some of the things that you would say to kind of like differentiate what is the media's perspective and your having worked in that industry?
So I think a lot of it is obviously perspective. Just kind of what you're kind of getting at is that the public sees things different than the person in law enforcement, and I think part of it is too what the officer's expectation of the job is coming into it, right? I always tell people it's not what you see on TV. We talk to people more than we're taking people to jail. You have to wear so many different hats, and I don't think people when they apply realize that sometimes. They think it's going to be, I'm put on this uniform and I'm going to look like a badass all day and stuff like that. You can go from being the enforcer to being a counselor, to being a resource finder, to temporarily being a guardian for a child while you're trying to find placement for them. So there's all these other hats. And, we're seeing obviously, because we have social media, we have better technology with our phones, officers with body cameras. Obviously, the public is getting a much different view of the world of policing these days, right? Which is good and bad, right? But I think a lot of times what people don't see, and I'm not excusing anybody's negative behavior in law enforcement, but I often tell people, some of these officers that we see on the news, some people, they are just not good people. Mm-hmm. You're going to have that everywhere. But some of these people are made that way because we have some flaws within law enforcement when it comes to taking care of our own. I kind of describe it like, I'm going to invite you into my house. I'm going to expose you to all of this crazy stuff. I'm not really going to give you the proper outlet on how to process the stuff that you're seeing. And then I just turn you loose into the street, and I don't think we're giving law enforcement or first responders as a whole, like the proper tools to deal with the trauma you encounter every single day. And we tell ourselves, because I've been here, but this is what I signed up for. The public says that, but this is what you signed up for. But I remind people, I'm a human being. Like I'm a human being that wore a uniform. And if clothes could take the trauma and take all the crap, literally crap, people throwing bodily fluids at you, people having all sorts of crazy communicable diseases, seeing people on their worst day, whether it's somebody's home being broken into, that could be the worst thing that's ever happened to them, right? All the way up to the loss of life. You're taking in all of that stuff on a daily basis, depending on where you live. And if you're not given the proper outlet, that manifests into a lot of different things. Not being able to sleep. PTSD is hot. People talking about that nowadays. Anxiety, insomnia, gut issues. It manifests into all these things that people don't see. And then what we do see is that first responder losing their shit, popping off on somebody. And there's a whole backstory to that a lot of times. And again, not to excuse anybody's behavior whatsoever, but that's a lot of what people don't see. I mean, I've had people that I'm related to say off the cuff stuff to me about my job, or, well, that's what y'all do. And I'm like, y'all, like, we family, you supposed to know me. Mm. You know what I mean? That's not what I do. I don't behave like that, And so it's just interesting because there's these two worlds of what law enforcement actually does, what the public thinks that they do. And it's like nobody's willing to give each side a look and see it from their perspective, and everybody wants to meet in the middle and just butt heads about it rather than trying to come to some sort of understanding about things, like you and I having this conversation. I tell people, you can come from completely different worlds. We can make completely different decisions, but we can sit down and have a conversation and try to understand. And we may not agree on everything, but just try to get a better understanding of, wow, like, how did you get to this point, or what got you into law enforcement, or what are some things that you've experienced that people don't really understand or know about. You know what I mean? And we don't give the other side enough grace. And in law enforcement, I can speak personally for first responder world, we don't give ourselves enough grace either. You're not a superhero. Yeah. You know, and superheroes have tragic origin stories, and their weaknesses don't take much, right? We're the same way. And I remind people, a lot of us came to the job with trauma already. Unresolved trauma. So then you have unresolved trauma, and then you stack what we do every day on top of that. You know, to me, that's a recipe for disaster.
Now, as which I know because people are going to say, Big Herc, you didn't ask her. As a black woman in law enforcement, did you feel like you experienced more racism than what was normal, or did you even acknowledge, was that even a thing?
So the funny thing is, so I started working at a department in Georgia, and so it's a really large department, and at the time, I mean, they had black officers, but they had few black officers to the point of when I would show up on a call, other black people or citizens would say, damn, they got y'all? I didn't even know we had some sisters out here. So I never experienced racism like within my department, because I do get asked that sometimes. It was more on the street, but the crazy thing is it wasn't even from like white people in the community. It was either black people, or I got the most hate from African men. That is where I ran into most of my issues. And I remember my very first training officer told me, she's like, you're gonna have, as a woman, you're gonna have issues with men from the Middle East and Hispanic men. Never ever had problems with them, ever. It was always African men that I had the worst issues with. The worst issues with. I never had any issues with anybody white, anybody Hispanic, anybody from other cultures. Like, the thing I remember the most is butting heads, because, you know, they see me, they see the women, you know, from the area that they're from, and I understand that a lot of those cultures are, you know, run by men. And I had to tell a guy straight up, because he wouldn't like face me while we were talking. And I did the little dance with him for a minute, you know, because he kept blading his body towards me and stuff. And I need to talk to you directly, you know, shoulder to shoulder, us facing each other. And I danced around for a minute, and he tried to overtalk me. And I was like, not today. We're not doing that today. And I said, listen, I understand where you're from. The men rule stuff. But I said, I don't know if anybody told you, but in Georgia, the black woman rules all. So I'm just telling you. And, you know, so I had to nip that in the bud really quickly. I said, you're not going to talk to me the way you talk to the women in your household. I didn't just show up at your house because I was bored. I showed up at your house because your life got so out of control, a third party had to be called to kind of calm things down and give you a resolution from here. So that's mostly what I experienced. And it really wasn't, to tell you the truth, I never even got called out of my name racially, like called a derogatory term, until I moved to Arizona. People think that happened in Georgia. I had a sergeant straight up tell me, because he asked me how I was like settling into Arizona. And I was like, I don't know. I said, culturally, it's just different than what I'm used to. The police culture is definitely different in Arizona than in Georgia. And he was like, yeah, but you know, you've been here 2 years. And I was like, yeah, no, it's the problem. I've been here 2 years. And, you know, I haven't found that balance yet. And I said, honestly, I find that Arizona, in my experience with the job anyway, and outside the job a little bit, is more racist than any other place I've lived. And I've lived on both coasts and in the South. And he looks me dead in my face and says, yeah, but you grew up in the South. And I was like, I don't know what you know about the South, but there are certain areas you just don't take your behind if you brown. Just, you know, but we're just not hurling racial things at each other just because you're walking down the street. You know, I didn't get called a nigga in uniform until I moved to Arizona. You know, and in the county I came from was a majority, you know, police department was a majority white police department. And some areas were still rural enough. It was overall a majority white county still. I never got called that. You know, I said that never once happened, but in Arizona, I got called a nigga in uniform 3 times in Arizona. Dang. Yeah. And I said, never once happened in Georgia. And I said, and the, you know, the rednecks that people would say that I worked with, they would not have allowed that. If somebody didn't say ma'am to me, they were going to say something to me, to that person. So there's no way they would have allowed somebody to call me out of my name like that. And when it happened, the officers that were with me here, the first time it happened, nobody came to my defense. I fought that fight by myself verbally. I'm not saying physically. I was just so enraged because it's never happened to me. And I'm like, who are you talking to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's just kind of been my experience. It's been more with the public when it comes to the racial stuff. I never had any issues internally. And like I said, just African men, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is about me, but they were not feeling me.
And what do you think would be some steps that society can make in trying to bridge that gap between police and community interaction and better relationships?
I mean, really on both sides is getting to understand where the other person is coming from, getting involved. It's really easy to point the finger at something you don't understand. I can't stand outside of your house and think I have an idea of what's going on inside of your house. Mm-hmm. I see you coming and going, you know what I mean? I may see where you shop, but I can't stand outside of your house and think I know everything that's going on inside of your home on a daily basis, you know? And again, remembering that law enforcement, first responders period, because this includes EMT, this includes firefighters, we're human beings. We had a family, we have friends and all this other stuff, and we have emotions, and we're seeing life at its worst every single day in some cases, and it takes a toll on you after a while. And just like the normal citizen that goes through life and experiences things, if you don't take care of yourself properly, you're gonna fail at some point. You know what I mean? And we have to do a better job of, one, taking care of each other as human beings. And in law enforcement, in the first responder world, we have to do a better job of giving people the tools that they need so that they can have a long life. Suicide in the first responder community is rampant right now.
Do you think that there needs to be more, maybe like I would call almost like decompression work? Because I know I've talked to military guys. There's a high rate of suicide for guys coming back from service, from serving overseas. Even people in prison. That's why a lot of guys get out here and to go right back, because they don't know how to. Like you said, there's a lot of PTSD, and nobody's really addressing that on both sides. Mm-hmm. So I mean, especially dealing with every day with that type of stuff, somebody abusing a kid, or this dude beating this, shooting this person. I mean, mentally, there's so much built up. Do you think that there needs to be more work in that area? It seemed like there would need to be.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we're seeing that shift. It's taken some time, but we're seeing that shift. In the first responder world, you'll hear more about wellness, peer support teams, talking to first responders about seeking counseling. Departments are trying to do a better job of putting certain procedures in place. So like after a big call or a critical incident happens, certain kind of checklists you have to go through. Not just me coming up saying, Marcus, you all right? You good? Because what's your response going to be? Yeah, I'm good. Because you don't want to be seen as weak. Broken. Yeah. And then even being a female in law enforcement, I held in a lot of stuff because I was at a precinct where I was one of a handful of females at my precinct. So it's even I'll cry if I get frustrated. I'm not crying because I'm sad or I'm weak. I'm just frustrated. Well, somebody else can misinterpret that as, oh, she's weak. So I would hold stuff in and act tougher than I really was because I want to be seen as one of the guys, kind of thing. But I think we hurt ourselves as females in first responder world because you're not a guy. You know what I mean? We react to things very differently. And so I think we have to take that into account too. Like I said earlier, people come from different backgrounds. People have different traumas that affect them going forward in their jobs. And I know things that happened in my past affected me. But we have to give people those tools to offload. I often tell when I'm speaking to officers, especially younger officers, I'm like, listen, you have to take care of yourself. You take care of your car, right? And the crazy thing is, when I'm talking to people, and this just goes for the general public, a lot of people's cars have been in the shop more recently than they've been to the doctor.
Yeah.
You know, and I love talking to the younger crowd because, you know, I remember being a rookie. You know, you come in there, and, you know, you got your little uniform on, you looking nice, and the dudes, you know, I joke with them. I'm like, y'all come in here with y'all extra tailored, you know, shirts and talking about your pre-workout, and you got your paleo and your keto and counting your macros, and you got your little meal prep lunch boxes and all that stuff. I said, shirt so tight if you sneeze, it'll pop off of you. That's cute to be all tailored like that. But I asked them, when's the last time, two things, you had a good cry, because crying is good for you, believe it or not. You don't have to do it in front of people, you can do it in private. But when's the last time you had a blood draw? I said, because it's nice to look pretty on the outside. I said, get that blood draw, get that blood panel back, and you'll be like, damn, that's me? Your cholesterol can be off the charts, your glucose could be off the charts, and all of that stuff affects us, and people don't realize like how much your mental health and your physical health affect you. And I don't think we're having those conversations enough, especially in academy and things like that, and telling people, listen, you're gonna see horrible stuff. I remember hearing that in academy, but nobody was teaching us what to do with that horrible stuff. There's stuff I don't even repeat to people because I don't want it in your head. You know, there's things I can't unsee. There's smells I can't, you know, I get a whiff of something sometimes and it brings me back to a call, or, you know, kid calls are like the worst, you know, so there's things like that, but you have to teach people how to offload. So I go to a lot of wellness conferences now. There's a lot more, like there's full-blown conferences talking about first responders and wellness. So we're moving in a good direction. We just have to keep that momentum going so that we can have healthier first responders. And we can, because if you're good to yourself, then you can go out and you can serve the public properly.
That's right.
But if you don't give a shit about yourself, or you feel like the people around you don't give a shit about you, you're gonna feel the same way when you go out and you have contact with a citizen. You're not gonna serve them to the fullest extent because you're like, meh, nobody cares about me, so why should I care about them? You know, and I definitely think it's a reciprocal relationship between first responder world and the public.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I've been, you know, I try to advocate like, you know, more community programs, interaction, you know, whether it's like basketball games or just, you know, Q&A sessions, all that stuff, get to know the people so they're humanized. You know, everybody's humanized, and I think that's a big part of it. But, hey, man, Big Herc 916, getting down with Lindsay, fresh out. Stop walking around with a crusty butt, smelly ball sack, and a funky hoo-ha. Big Herc said, wash that ass. Pick you up a t-shirt at freshoutseries.com.